The information provided in this communication is for informational purposes only, and does not constitute financial advice. It is important to note that past performance is not indicative of future results. Please consult with a qualified financial advisor to determine the suitability of any investment strategy.
Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive. Today we are going to be looking at how to really understand businesses.
Right.
But not just like your typical looking at the profit and loss statements and stuff. We're going to be looking at it through a different lens, and we're going to be using Orcelus Limited's newest book as a framework.
Sounds good.
For that. So they've got this really unique way of combining like creative concepts and real world examples and case studies and things like that to help us make sense of it all.
So what kind of creative concepts are we talking about here? Give me an example.
Okay, so get this. They use things like baking a cake and like understanding different flavors to illustrate some really complex business ideas.
I like that. I'm always looking for different ways to think about business and analyze businesses.
Yeah.
You never know where you're going to get that next good idea from.
Exactly. And it gets even more interesting because they don't shy away from tackling like real world situations. They've got in here stuff about like Volkswagen's emissions scandal, Boeing 737, AgX issues to show how like all these different things, ethics and production and finance and environmental considerations all kind of tie together.
That's so important because it's easy to get caught up in just one aspect.
Yeah.
But you really need to have that big picture view.
Exactly. So by the end of this, you'll be able to look at any business and kind of dissect it like a pro.
Awesome.
We'll be able to be asking the right questions, seeing the hidden connections, and understanding what truly makes a business tick.
I like it.
All while keeping ethics in mind, of course.
Of course. You got to keep the ethics in there. All right, so where do we start with this recipe for understanding business?
Okay, so they break it down into what they call the recipe for innovation, which focuses on 5 key elements: fuel, pressure, balance, humanity, and spark.
FBBHS got it.
Yeah.
But I'm sure it's much more than just an acronym. So what do those actually mean in the business world?
Yeah. So let's take a company that we know as like a real world example. So let's look at Tesla.
Yep.
So their fuel, like that driving force behind them, you know, that's like Elon Musk's ambition to create a sustainable future and revolutionize the auto industry.
Right.
So it's that powerful vision that's propelling them forward.
Right. So it's not just having an idea. It's about that passion that keeps you going.
Right. And then, you know, you have pressure, and those are those inevitable challenges that force you to refine and strengthen your ideas. So for Tesla, that would be like the competition from established automakers.
Right.
The pressure to constantly innovate and like push the boundaries of technology.
Yeah, it's like diamonds are formed under pressure. It's often those challenges that lead to the biggest breakthroughs.
And then you've got balance, right? Finding that sweet spot between all the different aspects of your business. So Tesla needs to balance its ambitious goals with like financial realities, production capabilities, consumer demand. It's like keeping all those plates spinning without anything crashing.
Yeah, so it's about being adaptable to the business environment.
Exactly. And then we can't forget humanity.
Right.
They talk about this a lot, like keeping people at the heart of what you do.
Yeah.
So for Tesla, it's not just about making cars that are good for the environment, but also making them enhance the driving experience and connect with people's aspirations for the future.
It's remembering that businesses impact all these people, employees, customers, the community. So you have to consider those values.
Right. And then finally, you need that spark. It's like the aha moment, the catalyst that brings it all together.
Yeah.
So for Tesla, maybe it was that moment they realized they could create an electric car that was practical, but also stylish.
Okay, so it's that moment when everything just clicks into place.
Exactly. Now, here's where they get really interesting. They connect these 5 elements to the natural world and to the economy, drawing parallels between like how ecosystems and businesses thrive.
That's a unique perspective.
So they argue that just as a forest needs a delicate balance of like resources and conditions, so too does a business. And if you disrupt that balance, the whole system risks collapse.
It's a powerful analogy.
Yeah.
businesses really are part of a larger ecosystem. And they need to work in a way that's sustainable for all parts.
Right. And they extend that to the idea of an engine. Like an engine needs all its parts working to generate power. A business needs all these FPBHS elements working to achieve growth.
Yeah, you need all those elements working together to really get that innovation and get things moving.
Right. Now, building on that idea of sustainability, Orcelus introduces another framework.
Okay, wait. We're already juggling all those. What's this new one?
It's called EPFEI. It stands for Ethics, Production, Finance, Environment, and Integrity.
EPFEI.
And they consider these the essential ingredients for building ethical and sustainable business practices.
So it's like a checklist to make sure a business is being responsible.
Exactly. And they actually take it a step further. They don't just define these ingredients. They give you measurable factors.
I like it.
To actually assess a business in each of those areas.
That's what I want to hear. Give me the details. Let's break each one down.
Okay.
And then starting with ethics.
Okay, so ethics might sound kind of broad.
Yeah.
But Orcelus makes it really tangible. You can evaluate a company's ethics by looking at how they treat their employees. Are they paying fair wages?
Yeah.
Do they have policies that promote diversity and inclusion? You know, do they prioritize their well-being?
You got to walk the walk, not just talk the talk.
Exactly. So how about production? I think this one's really interesting because it's not just about what a company makes,
Right.
but how they make it.
Yeah, that's often overlooked.
Right. So they encourage businesses to consider the whole life cycle of a product. That means like where you source your materials from, how the manufacturing impacts the environment, the workers, how the product is transported, disposed of, all that stuff.
So they're taking responsibility for the whole journey of that product.
And they go a step further, and they believe businesses should actively market products, have a positive impact on people's lives and the environment.
Right. It's not enough to just not do bad things. You got to do good things.
And where that's not possible, you know, if a product has some environmental drawbacks, they emphasize the importance of transparency.
Yeah.
So businesses should be honest about the impacts and explain like their mitigation strategies.
Honesty and accountability are crucial, especially when we're talking about environmental responsibility.
Okay, and that brings us to finance.
Okay.
Orcelus really emphasizes ethical financial practices and transparent reporting.
Oh, yeah, because this is where things can get murky and we see those big scandals that erode public trust.
So things they look for would be like manageable debt levels, consistent growth, and always being honest, even if it means losing some short-term gain.
Right. You got to take that long-term view.
Exactly.
And realize that building trust and reputation is more valuable than quick profits.
And speaking of long-term thinking, that leads right into environment, which is a big one in the EPFEI framework. And this one is about way more than just like reducing a company's carbon footprint.
Right, because there are so many different aspects to environmental responsibility.
So they believe that businesses should really consider the well-being of both the planet and the people on it. So employee health and safety, responsible waste disposal, impacts on natural resources, protection of biodiversity, all that good stuff.
It's recognizing that it really affects people's lives.
Right. And then finally, we have integrity, which they see as like the glue that holds all these elements together.
This is the big one. This is what ties everything together.
Right. So integrity means making decisions honestly, transparently, and striving to serve humanity in a way that aligns with your moral compass.
So it's about putting those ethical values into action with every decision.
Exactly. So that integrity should be reflected in everything a business does. From how they treat their employees to how they interact with their customers to the community.
Right.
It's about building that culture of trust and accountability.
That makes sense. So do they provide any real-world examples to show how this works?
They do. They have some really compelling case studies.
Perfect.
To demonstrate how this framework plays out, they show companies that got it right and companies that got it really wrong.
You've piqued my interest now. Let's get into some of those case studies.
All right, let's do it.
Okay, so you mentioned case studies.
Yeah.
Let's hear about those.
Okay, so on the kind of cautionary tale side of things, they analyze Volkswagen's emissions scandal, the Boeing 737 MAX issues, and the BP Deepwater Horizon oil spill.
So those are some pretty big ethical lapses with major consequences.
Yeah.
What were some of the key things they highlighted?
So the main thread that runs through all of these cases is that prioritizing profits over ethical considerations ultimately backfires.
Yeah, it seems like those short-term gains often lead to long-term pain.
Exactly. So let's look at the Volkswagen case.
Yeah.
I'm sure you're probably familiar with it, but
Yeah.
they cheated on emissions tests, right? And so that was obviously deceptive and harmful to the environment.
Yeah, and it really damaged their reputation, led to fines, and just eroded trust in the entire industry.
Right. And then there's the Boeing 737 MX.
Right.
Again, you probably remember those tragic crashes.
Yeah.
But what's interesting is they really dig deep into how Boeing made those decisions, like rushing the development of the MCAS system, failing to adequately train pilots, even concealing information about the potential risks.
It's just a reminder that safety has to come first.
Yeah.
And you have to be transparent with technology that impacts people's lives. It's really concerning, that lack of accountability.
Right. It seemed like they were more focused on getting the plane to market quickly to compete with Airbus than ensuring that it was safe.
Exactly. Yeah. And then, of course, the BP oil spill is another example of what can happen when safety protocols are ignored.
Right. So BP's cost-cutting measures and failure to maintain equipment were big factors that led to the disaster.
It's just a huge reminder of the damage that can result when profits are prioritized over responsibility.
So those are kind of the darker example.
I'm sure they have some positive ones, too.
They do. They highlight Main Freight, which is a New Zealand-based logistics company. And they show them as like an example of how ethical and sustainable practices can actually be a recipe for success.
So what are they doing differently?
So they really seem to understand how those EPFEI ingredients we talked about earlier contribute to a good business. So they're really known for their commitment to their employees. So they create a culture of ownership and invest in your team's growth.
So many companies don't do that. They don't treat their employees as valuable.
Right.
Main Freight seems to understand that a happy workforce means success.
Exactly. And they don't stop there. They prioritize sustainability in all their operations. Fuel-efficient vehicles, renewable energy sources, constantly looking for ways to minimize their impact.
They're walking the walk, not just talking the talk.
Right. And they're also really transparent about their finances. So they have a reputation for ethical reporting, even when it means maybe taking a hit in the short term.
It's that long-term view again.
Exactly. They're building trust with their customers and their investors. So Main Freight shows that doing the right thing can be really good for business. They've shown you don't have to sacrifice profits to operate sustainably and ethically.
It's inspiring to see. So it sounds like they have some pretty creative approaches here, too.
They do. So we talked about the baking a cake analogy earlier. Well, they suggest using our 5 senses to evaluate a business.
Wait, our 5 senses? How does that work?
Yeah, so it's kind of like tapping into those gut feelings you have about a company and going beyond just the numbers and data.
Interesting.
So, for example, you can try to feel the emotional connection a customer has with a brand. Is it built on trust, shared values, or does something feel off?
So you're kind of sensing the vibe of the company.
Exactly. And then there's taste.
Taste.
You can taste the bitterness of unethical practices.
Interest.
Or do you taste the sweetness of a company that operates with integrity?
Yeah, if a company exploits workers or is bad for the environment, that would definitely leave a bad taste in your mouth.
Right. And then you have hearing.
Hearing,
You can hear the whispers of negative feedback about a company.
Oh, so you're paying attention to what people are saying, both customers and employees.
Exactly. And seeing, you can see the visible signs of a company's commitment to sustainability.
So are they using recycled materials? Promoting diversity, that kind of thing.
Exactly. And then finally, there's smell.
Smell,
This one's a little more metaphorical.
Right.
But you can try to smell those inconsistencies between a company's stated values and their actions.
So you're using your intuition if something doesn't feel right.
Yeah, does it pass the smell test?
I like it.
So by engaging all 5 of our senses, they argue that we can really get a better understanding of a company.
Yeah, it reminds us there's more to business than just numbers. There's that human element.
Exactly.
So what's their most unconventional approach?
Okay, so they introduced the idea of using abstract algebra.
Abstract algebra, wow.
I know.
Okay.
It sounds a little intimidating.
Yeah, that takes me back to college.
Right. But they explain it in a really accessible way. So they use it to categorize different stakeholder types and their relationships with the company.
All right, so how do groups and rings and fields apply to business?
Okay, so let's start with groups. Think of internal employees as a group. So
Okay.
they share common goals,
Mhm.
they work together, they have that sense of belonging.
And operate as a unit.
Right. And now imagine loyal customers as a ring.
Okay.
So they have a strong relationship with the brand,
Mm.
they're constantly engaging.
All right, in that inner circle.
Exactly. And then potential customers would be a field,
A field. Okay.
right? Like a vast field of opportunity for a company.
Okay, so they have the potential to become customers.
Right. And they might not be customers yet, but you can draw them in.
Right, you can cultivate those relationships.
Exactly. And they argue that this perspective can really give you insights into how to build a relationship
Okay.
with all these different types of people.
It's understanding those different dynamics to make better decisions.
Okay, so before we wrap up this part, we need to talk about code of conduct.
Right, because it's not enough to just talk about ethics.
Yeah.
You got to have a framework in place.
Right. And Orcelus really emphasizes that.
Okay.
They say it needs to be more than just words.
Yeah, it has to guide actions.
Right. It needs to be in the company's DNA, influencing everything they do.
So how do they do that? How do they make sure their code of conduct is actually effective?
So Orcelus says it should be based on both internal and external considerations.
Okay.
So internally, it reflects the company's mission and beliefs. It explains how employees should act.
It's like setting ground rules for ethical behavior.
And then
properly.
externally, it addresses their impact on the world around them.
Right, because they have a responsibility to society, to the environment.
So that would be things like their environmental policies, how they treat their employees, how they source materials, how they interact with customers. Like, are they transparent in their pricing?
Yeah, are they protecting customer data?
Exactly. So it's a lot to consider.
It is.
And they actually highlight what can happen when you don't have a strong ethical framework.
Okay.
So they bring up the Solomon Brothers Treasury bond scandal.
Oh, yeah, that was a big one.
Yeah. So Solomon Brothers was doing some shady stuff, and it damaged their reputation and almost ruined the company.
Yeah.
And Warren Buffett had to come in because he's known for his integrity and helped to salvage the situation.
So that shows that strong leadership and ethics can really make a difference.
Especially during a crisis.
Wow, we've covered a lot.
We have.
From innovation to ethics to SWOT. But there's still this SWOT analysis with the time machine.
Right. And they have a really interesting twist
I can't wait to hear about it.
on this classic tool that I think you'll find fascinating.
I'm ready. Let's do it. All right, let's talk about this time machine SWOT analysis.
Okay, so they start by acknowledging the value of the traditional SWOT, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats.
Right.
But they say it's missing a key element.
I'm guessing that element is time.
Yeah. They argue that a traditional SWOT is like a snapshot.
Okay.
It captures the business at one point in time.
Right.
But businesses are constantly evolving.
Yeah, what happened in the past shapes where you are now,
Yeah.
and that affects the future.
Exactly. So that's where Einstein comes in.
Okay.
They were inspired by his idea that space and time are all connected. So they say we need to add a time dimension to the SWOT analysis.
Interesting.
So we're not just looking at where a business is now,
Right.
but where it's been and where it's going.
So it's a more dynamic approach.
Exactly. And they have this great analogy to show how the past influences the present.
Okay, I like analogies. Let's hear it.
Okay, so imagine holding your arm straight out for 10 minutes.
Ouch. Yeah, I can imagine that would get uncomfortable.
Right. You'd start to feel that ache in your muscles, and that's the past influencing the present. Your brain is like, hey, remember that pain, let's avoid that.
Right, so you put your arm down.
Yeah. So we're always learning from the past, right? Our successes and our failures.
Exactly. Learn from your mistakes. Don't repeat them.
And Orcelus takes it a step further. They introduce this concept of dark matter.
Dark matter, like in space.
Yeah. So dark matter represents those unknown factors.
Okay.
Those things we can't predict that might impact the business later.
So it's like acknowledging that there are always going to be some unknowns.
Exactly. So we need to be humble,
Right?
open to new information,
Yeah.
and adaptable as things change.
I like this time-based SWOT with the dark matter element. Makes a lot of sense.
It really does. And it highlights how important it is to constantly learn, right? Businesses can't just sit back and relax.
Yeah. You got to stay ahead of the curve.
They need to keep adapting.
Always learning.
Exactly. So, wow, we have learned about a lot of stuff in this deep dive.
We have lots of tools and frameworks.
From the 5 elements of innovation to the EPFEI framework.
It's been so insightful.
Yeah. And they end their book with this powerful message, encouraging us to be really conscious consumers and investors. So look beyond the branding and the marketing and ask yourself those hard questions.
Yeah. Do their actions match their words?
Exactly. Think about their impact on employees, the environment, society.
Because business is about more than profit.
Right. It's about creating value for everybody.
Exactly.
So we hope you've enjoyed this deep dive and that you feel ready to analyze businesses like a pro.
I do. I feel like I have a lot more knowledge.
Awesome. Now, before we go, we'd love to leave you with a final thought to ponder.
Okay.
If businesses are truly like recipes, what are those secret ingredients that make some companies truly stand out?
It's probably a mix of innovative thinking, ethical leadership, a real commitment to sustainability, and a deep understanding of how businesses are part of our world.
So tell us what resonated with you from this episode. Did anything surprise you? Share your thoughts with us.
Yeah. And if you have other topics you'd like us to cover, let us know.
Yeah, we'd love to hear from you. And until next time, keep diving deep and asking those tough questions.
The world needs more informed people. And we think knowledge is the key to a better future.